I would argue, and I'll probably get criticized for this, but I don't think that you can scale to a level of success at the top of the industry if you don't have the right people around you.
So, Reza, I am so excited. Thank you for taking the time. Why don't you introduce yourself to the ambitious attorneys who are on here right now?
You know, this road was never easy. And, you know, one of the questions you had in the introduction is, how did you do it? And really, I think it takes you and all the firm owners who are on to really believe in yourself and to believe in the vision that you have. Regardless of what people are telling you, folks who have been there before you are telling you, or how you should be doing it, or how it's been done in the past. I think if you have a vision and it is an authentic vision that you truly believe in, you know, if you put the hard work in, it's going to happen for you. And there are many different ways to get to where your ultimate goal and vision are. And there's no one silver bullet. And for me, it was always to have a firm where I could scale, I could grow to reach a wider audience, to be able to service our clients at a bigger scale. And that was always my vision. You know, prior to really focusing on acquiring cases and growing the practice, you know, I was a solo practitioner in a spare bedroom in a condo. And, you know, I was happy handling 15, 20 cases a year. And I did everything. I was our receptionist, and then I was also the trial attorney. But what I realized really quickly is it's hard to balance life that way. And I'm a firm believer in having a balance between taking care of yourself, re-energizing, recharging, but also putting in the hard work. And so my vision of scaling and having access to servicing, you know, thousands of clients across the country would not have been a reality if I didn't actually come to grips with the truth of, hey, look, I got to bring in help. I have to find people. I have to find people who believe in my vision and who are as driven as I am, because at the end of the day, this can't be a one-man show. And it's really, and I say this all the time, my most valuable asset in the firm today is the people that we have. And it wasn't always like that. And it's a real struggle. And I would argue, and I'll probably get criticized for this, but I don't think that you can scale to a level of success at the top of the industry if you don't have the right people around you. There are way smarter people that are on our team than me. And that's intentional, and that's by design. I mean, I think you have to recognize what you don't know. And if you surround yourself with ambitious, driven people who are talented and smart, it makes life so much easier. And so that's kind of my intro as to, you know, starting a firm and all the struggles we go through. And I've made many, many, many mistakes, and I'll continue to make mistakes. And I make mistakes today, but the thing that I do is I don't hold on to those mistakes, and I try to learn from them and move on as quickly as possible.
I love that, Reza. So one of the questions that we definitely want to chomp right into because of the title of today's session is this marriage to data that, you know, we were looking up studies, and we found that only 14% of law firms, you know, are actually using some form of data. And only a very, very, very tiny percentage of that 14% are actually using data to make decisions. So bring us through the process of, first, when in your growth trajectory, now having over 50 team members in your firm, when in your growth trajectory did you have a realization where you were like, wow, I gotta like really focus on data? And then the second question is, how are you using data to make decisions quickly in your firm, and more importantly, the right decisions?
Great question. I mean, before I left the house this morning, I watched Jeff Bezos get sent up into space and back. And that was based on data. I mean, they use data, the scientists use data to figure out how they can do this, how they could send a rocket up, launch off the capsule with the passengers, and then also calculated through data how to bring them back safely into Earth. So that is a perfect example of using data. And I never did this, But as soon as I started hiring and scaling, I realized how quickly and how risky the gamble is. I mean, in terms of spending, I mean, if you've got payroll, if you've got rent, you've got employees. I mean, our number one job as firm owners is to be able to provide a stable and secure environment for our teammates so that that's not something they have to worry about, right? Where is payroll going to come from? And so I realized really quickly, when you combine the overhead and then the necessary resources to compete in the advertising market in a place like Southern California, it could get very expensive very quickly. And if I didn't have the data to know what it cost me to acquire a case, if I didn't have the data to know what my average settlements were, if I didn't have the data to see what is driving our demands and then ultimately our settlements, who knows how long my runway would have been. And, instead of putting Jeff Bezos up and back down with his passengers, I don't know how successful I would have been, because how can I make a decision if I don't know what it costs me to acquire a case? If you're spending $10,000, $50,000, $500,000 a month in advertising, if you can't tell me what it costs for you to acquire a case and through which channels you got those cases, then I think you've already lost the battle. And so for us, we try to get really granular with our data. We look at cost per acquisition. We look at average settlement. We look at average case age. We look at which channels of incoming cases are working, and we try to double down on those sources. And so I don't think that you could really scale and be successful at scale if you're not keeping track of these numbers. I know firms who are in our market, who are friends of ours, who are competitors, who are paying 4x to acquire a case. And to me, I don't have the stomach to do that. And I don't think that that's sustainable either. So that's on the advertising side. But then we look at data internally. How is our staff doing? Every Monday, we put out a KPI report, a key performance indicator report that goes to the whole firm for every position in the firm. So if you are on our legal team and you're paired up with a legal assistant, how many demands went out that week? And then it compares you to the rest of the staff and the rest of the teams. Demands drive settlements. What drives demands? We then look at how many medical records were ordered by position, by individual, and we get to see that. And so these are key metrics that I think really drive revenue and ultimately drive growth, because number one, I don't think you can scale a firm without getting more cases. So let's get that out of the way. And there's people who will argue with me, well, I'm going to get less cases, but I'm going to get better cases. But I have yet to meet an attorney and a firm owner who has figured out how to only get better cases. Now, unless you've got some referral practice and you're relying on other attorneys to send you their cases, I've never seen it, and I've yet to meet somebody. And so really, to scale a firm, you have to get more cases. And then more cases doesn't necessarily translate into more revenue and then ultimately more return at net at the end of the day. So you have to be really careful. You have to be really selective. And again, back to, if you don't have the data, I mean, if you're signing up a bunch of shitty cases and now you're staffing up so that you can service those shitty cases, the clients are going to be unhappy. They're going to leave you bad reviews. You're going to be unhappy because you're losing money on those cases, and your staff is going to be unhappy. And so you also have to be selective, and you have to decide what type of firm you want to be.
One question I want to kind of double down on here is the first part of the question that I asked is, when did you realize, like, when is the point where data becomes important? Because I know in my experience, from 0 to like 3 million or so, I don't know how much time I would put into data. It's really just rainmaking, a lot of kind of rapid fire, rapid problem solving. And then past that $3 million mark, I guess it would depend on practice, right? Because there's higher margin practice. Looking back, like, where's the point where it's like, okay, I got to really, like, maybe I got to hire a consultant to set up a data dashboard. Maybe I really got to go into this data thing.
Yeah, look, I think everyone is different. I didn't start early enough. if somebody asked me what my average case value was, I had no idea. If somebody asked me what my cost per acquisition was, I had no idea. I just knew I was spending money. And at some point, money was coming back in, but I had no concept. And I started thinking about the practice of law differently. I started thinking of it as a business. So I don't know that there's a revenue number. I would just say start today. I mean, just basic things. How about how many phone calls you get in a month? How about things like how many settlements in a month? And what are the average of that? How about how many cases you're dropping? And so for me, it was really, I shifted my thinking from thinking, hey, if I'm a good enough lawyer, then the practice will take care of itself. I started thinking of it as a business. And so if I was a Fortune 500 CEO of a public company, I would be fired so quickly that, I mean, your head would spin, right? But we're talking about your own company. We're talking about something that's way more important than you being a CEO of a Fortune 500 public company. This is the CEO really of your life and your livelihood and that of your family. So I think data is important day one. I think even if you're a solo practitioner, you should start thinking about data. And you don't need anything fancy. You don't need to create these super expensive. I mean, there's so many options out there right now. A lot of the CRMs that are right out of the box provide you really good enough reporting, I think. But you could have an Excel spreadsheet, but know the basic information. How many cases are you signing up? How many are you dropping? What is the average case value? What are the average fees? And I think if you have that compass, if you start there, then you can make decisions. If you're spending even $1 on advertising, and here's something else I'm going to say that's a little controversial, but I firmly believe it. All advertising works. Everything works. Okay. It all works. TV, billboard, print, internet, digital, it all works. It just depends on to what level and what you're willing to pay for cost per acquisition. But ultimately it all works. And you have to decide what's right for you, how much you're willing to tolerate the risk, and what makes financial sense at the end of the day. But I think if you take the mentality of what if you were CEO of a public company, what would happen to you if you didn't know this data? What would happen to you if you didn't make the decisions to turn things around? What would happen to you if you have a really, really terrible employee that you didn't get rid of? Well, I'll tell you what, your board of directors would fire you. And so have the integrity and accountability in yourself to make these decisions. But the only way you can make them and take all emotion out of it, and that's how I used to run. It was all emotional. Hey, but I like this person. I can't fire them. Hey, but this person has a family. I can't fire them. Well, actually, our first responsibility is to the rest of the staff, right? And if you've got a really terrible employee whose numbers are not good, who you've talked to over and over again, well, you take the emotion out of it by just looking at the data.
Two other points I think are important that kind of piggyback off what you're saying is the definition of an entrepreneur and a CEO all comes down to two things: managerial decisions, which is the key phrase within the definition of a CEO, and an entrepreneur is someone who takes greater than usual financial risks. And the marriage of these two things together is where you're able to take greater than usual financial risks, and you're able to do that in a capacity where you can make high level and the right decisions. And data is the fuel for being able to take financial risks and make the right decisions. Would you agree with that?
Oh, totally. Totally. I think I was just wired this way. I have always been this, moonshot idea, but belief in myself and believe in the vision, and then a risk taker. And I think I've just always been that way. And so I agree, data is the fuel, but money is also the fuel. Without the money to fuel all of these things that you're doing, it becomes very difficult to be competitive. And so I think, very early on, we had some success. I had some big cases that I got super lucky picking up. And I just knew that if I had a little bit more powder, that I can make more headway. And so I invested and reinvested and reinvested. It's again, it's kind of like going all in. I mean, I decided I was going to go all in, and I really just went for it, and I did it, and I stayed focused. I stayed committed. I have tried to make most of our decisions not based on ego, but based on principle, and again, based on data. And we've had some luck for sure.
A question I have for you is, if you're to condense it down into the top 3 numbers, if you were stranded on a desert island, as they say in the book Traction, and someone from a helicopter were to drop a crumpled up piece of paper to you on a desert island, and you had a one-way walkie-talkie to make decisions back to the company from that island, what data would have to be on that crumpled up piece of paper that you get dropped to from a helicopter?
Yeah, so it'll be different for every firm. We're a personal injury firm. So these are the things that I believe make a difference in our firm. How many cases we signed up in a week, a month, a day, whatever. How many cases we dropped in a week, a month, or day. So you want the same date period. How many you signed up, how many you dropped. Then you want to know, what is your average case age? Because if you aren't moving cases at the speed as which they should, it could really kill and choke off your cash flow. What is your average case age? And then the 2 that I think are really big for us, the thing that drives settlements are demands. In order to get demands out, you need medical records. So we really, really focus on how many medical records were ordered, how many were then received, how many demands went out. And then ultimately you look at what your settlements are. But I think that takes care of itself. So the cases that come in, how many were dropped, how many medical records were ordered, how many demands went out. And then ultimately, I think the rest of it takes care of itself. But if you aren't ordering medical records, that means your demands aren't going out. If you're ordering medical records, but your demands aren't going out, well, then now you know where the clog is. And you got to look at the team that's in charge of preparing the demands and getting them out.
And a perfect example of lead metrics, right, is instead of looking at demands, we're going to look at medical records out, right? And we can stress out our teams by just looking at the end number all the time, because then the team will feel like, how do I have control over this end number, right? But if we can discipline ourselves to track lead metrics, right, that the team can feel like they're winning on a weekly, monthly, or quarterly basis, we can start to pick up momentum, right? So I love that you're doing that. One question I do have that's in the back of my mind is, I've realized, for example, guys like Mike Morse, for example, who run huge charity campaigns in their market or do these big branding initiatives that may have an ROI. I've noticed that if you get too married to dollar in, dollar out in every decision you make in advertising, you can miss those big zoomed out branding moves. So I'm curious, from your perspective, being data centric, how do you take risks and how do you do those blue ocean moves, like the moves that almost no other law firms in your market are doing, even if it's maybe a little vague in terms of tracking return on investment?
Well, that's such a great question. And I think you're right. I don't think every advertising you could say dollar in, dollar out. You have to decide what's important to you. For us, and I know Mike Morris, the community is really important to us. And if we're spending X amount of dollars to go out in the community on a weekend, or we do Taco Tuesdays here, we do bike nights on Wednesdays, we do bike nights on Thursdays, and I can't tell you what our return is on that dollar for dollar, but I know we're out in the community. I know we are meeting people. I know we're reaching a demographic we otherwise wouldn't be reaching in our traditional marketing sense. And I know that that community is growing. And every time we go out, we do a community event. I can't tell you the response that we get through social media. And randomly, we'd be driving down the freeway and someone's wearing our t-shirts. Randomly, we're driving and people have our swag on. And so I think it has to be a combination of what is important to you. If the community is important to you, well, then there are very easy things that you can do tomorrow to get out in front of people who are really appreciate it, right? And this comes back really to authenticity. Are you authentic or are you full of shit? And so every lawyer pretty much says the same thing. I'll fight for you. I'll win your case. Insurance companies are bullies. We'll take care of them. And we care. You know, we care, we care, we care. Well, everyone's saying that, but how true is that really? And so you have to think about it in terms of giving back to the community, not to get a return, but so that, you know, if you're authentic and you truly care about the community and you have opportunities to give back and raise charity and funds, well, then show that, prove it, put your money where your mouth is, and just be authentic, because people can see authenticity, they respect authenticity, and it comes back tenfold. It does. And I don't know that you can measure it the way you measure a pay-per-click campaign, but I know that you can measure it in terms of how it's impacting the community and how they're responding to you.